Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cegeka Podcast. I am Mihai Popa. At Cegeka Podcast, we have short discussions with people in the IT world on technology topics. Today we're talking with Cliff Moyce, who is a leader of transformation and innovation in financial services and capital markets based in the UK. Cliff is a known writer and media commentator on the IT industry trends, especially fintech, and has worked with the software engineers from more countries than an average person probably visits in a lifetime. So, hi, Cliff. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me on. And I'm sure your podcasts are very interesting. You also have got a lot of the experience that's of interest to many people. Of course, you and I have worked together in different organizations over the years very successfully. So it's nice to be speaking to you again, and on one of my favorite subjects, which I'm sure you want to introduce.
Yes, our topic, sure. Our topic for today is the commoditization of software development services, especially in the outsourcing world, but not only. What that means in itself, and how successful companies can still make a difference and add value to their commoditized services, given that in a commodity market, lower prices tend to be the main driver. And Cliff, you know a lot about commodities. You were a director with a couple of commodity exchanges in London.
It doesn't mean I recommend commoditization, though, as you know. But yes, I certainly know the difference between a commodity and a high value add product, and you know where my sentiments lie with software engineering.
Yes, I do. I've been following your articles, and I did enjoy that part where you said that software development right now is basically gathering feedback from unhappy users and making it into a list of new features rather than designing software that's, let's say, more future-proof or better written. So,
Carry on. Yes, please.
My first question was, what's your view? How do you see the software development services world in its evolution since you've been in this game for 30 odd years?
Yes, 30 odd years. Amazing, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
I was a chemical engineer and an industrial engineer, and like many people of my age, my IT story is that I read articles about these new things called PCs in maybe 1983, 84. I got my manufacturing company to buy a PC because I saw the power that it could bring. For example, at that point, production management was done on huge charts across lots of walls in big rooms using string and pins and things, color coding. And the first thing I did with a PC was put that onto spreadsheets, and it was like magic. It was like being a witch, and and then of course here we are today, many years later, with much better technology, much better tools. Technology, the difference in the business and IT has blurred enormously, and now for many organizations, the business is technology, of course. Uber, etc., etc. So I've seen this, fantastic evolution, and we must acknowledge that. It's I don't think any of us could have seen how well it was going to go in terms of information technology. On the other hand, there are things that trouble me, and because I sit in both camps, if you were to say to me, when people say to me, "What do you do?" That terrible question at a party. I say simply now, I run companies, and that's true. That's my main thing now. I'm a board level director, CEO, COO, and so I have an interest in every aspect of the company and its commercial success. Of course, I run companies which either do IT or where IT is critically important, and many things trouble me. I see far too many companies failing. I see far too many product developments failing. I read a lot on that subject, and the failure rates are, depending who you listen to, between 40% and 85%. I still see an enormous number of IT projects failing as well, and I feel that reflects badly on the IT industry, even though it's perhaps not engineers' fault. And I want to solve that problem, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about software development, especially, and I think that feeds into product development failure rates and project failure rates. And I just feel that if everyone understood the topic a bit better and changed some of their fundamental assumptions about the topic, then things would go better. And one of the things I've seen is, there is an argument now that software development coding is commoditized, that the tools that we have now have allowed us to commoditize it, and that's not where the value add is. The value add is elsewhere in the software development lifecycle. Mm-hmm. Now, I will challenge that because it's fundamentally untrue, because when something becomes commoditized, it becomes homogenized. So soybeans, for example, the usual example I've used for a commodity, they are all the same. And actually, there's a huge benefit to them all being the same. There's a huge benefit to the consumers, to the producers, and so on. And it suits everyone for it to all be the same. Software coding and software design, which is an important thing that I want to talk about, has become less homogenized, more heterogeneous than it was in the 1980s.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
In the 1980s, people who wrote code on mainframes, pretty much, they were specialists, they were experts, and they all had the same background. Now, let's face it, there weren't many mainframes and there weren't many development languages, and they all went on the same courses. But there was a very high ethos of engineering, and it was very much regarded as a knowledge job, a specialist job. And if you look at their code going back, and even what followed, things like COBOL and C and so on, you see more similarity, homogenization then than there is now. and is that a natural evolution? I will say no, it's not. I will say that the reducing homogenization of coding is actually because the bottom, the low quality work, has got lower and lower, worse and worse, and there's more and more of it. And and please forgive me, of course, because you work in the outsource nearshore IT industry. I would say that the outsourcing of systems development is largely to blame. Okay. I will say that the people who provide those services are only partly to blame. And actually, it's client assumptions that are perhaps the biggest issue. It is them that assumes that coding is all the same. And one of the assumptions that I always challenge with people, and it's actually not, these people aren't stupid, they're cleverer than me, but they don't know enough. For business people, they don't know enough about systems development. And I think everyone should know a bit more than they do. And one of the easy assumptions that people make, but it's fundamentally wrong, is that there's something called design architecture and there's something called coding. And
they're separate.
Yeah, and as long as they employ the architect, and the architect's a pretty good guy or girl, then everything will be okay, because then the developers, the coders, will do tasks. That's another fundamental wrong assumption. And the accumulation of all those tasks will deliver that design, and everything will be okay. Now, the huge failure rate, if you read the McKinsey 2012 report on IT failure rates, it's shocking. There's this 70% of companies, their projects failed so badly as to threaten the future of the company. There's still 80-something% failure rates in projects. And I will say it comes down to some of these assumptions. Because if and I was never a software engineer, a systems developer. I was always the guy who had the vision as to what IT could do, and I was building IT departments. I was doing the logical design of systems, what they had to do from a business perspective, what problems they had to solve, for whom, and I never really got down to the nitty-gritty of coding myself very much at all. But I know enough about it to know that developers are not just writing code. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that doctors are not just writing prescriptions. Developers, they all look like they're doing the same thing. They're looking at the screen, okay, but they're thinking, and they're thinking about how best to deliver this function, how best to solve this problem. And every single one of those decisions is actually a design decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about writing the code. And so when we talk about the terrible impact of poor quality code, and I'm not going to name any company names, but I could sit here and name large corporations with massive problems, which manifest mainly in the cost of support, because poor systems cost 10 times to 100 times more to support than good systems. I could name those companies, and I'm not going to do that.
Better not.
But it's this idea that someone can use PowerPoint to design a system and other guys write code. And if the code is poor, it's because, they make syntax errors and so on. Well, yeah, of course, poor developers will do things like syntax errors. But really, poor developers generally are out of their depth. And I will name India. I don't feel too bad about this because India is my favorite country in the world from a personal perspective. I love the place and I love the people.
Mm-hmm.
India became rapidly a victim of its own success. When Edward Yordan, the American, went over and started working with Tata in the 70s and 80s, he found that the guys were highly qualified, highly educated, all had master's degrees in mathematics and computer science, and were really good and tremendously motivated and committed, and saw that this country could really raise the bar, which what Yordan was all about, raising the bar. It was his obsession. And of course, they became so successful that now, I go over there and, anyone who has any degree, the last time I went to India, an IT company turned up in a small city I was in, only 1 million people. I won't say which one it is, and hired every single leaver from every single college in the town. Now, these people had degrees in finance and history and geography and geology and maths, engineering, and it didn't matter. Hired them all, sent them on a short coding course. At the end, they could, pass a simple coding test.
Sounds like a German soldier recruitment at the end of the Second World War.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but the next step is these people are being billed to clients. Now, this is where it all falls apart because you cannot expect these people to be making the right decisions. You could say that, they've got people looking over their shoulder and helping them and all so on and so on. And that's true. But, these projects, and I get called in to audit these projects. I get called in to rescue these projects and rescue these companies that are doing these projects. And it's the same thing over and over again. It's the fundamental assumptions that you can just buy coding and development on price. It doesn't matter. If you say to me, I will sell you, senior developers for 500 euros a day, and somebody else says, I will sell you developers for 100 euros a day, then this assumption that I'm going to take the 100 euros because it doesn't matter, developers, it's so fundamentally wrong. And that's why software development has not been commoditized, because if it was commoditized, it would be okay to buy on price, and it's not okay to buy on price because your project will fail, your product will fail, your company will fail, and it may not close down tomorrow, but you will spend 10 times more supporting that product, supporting inverted commas. The support, as we all know, it really just means fixing it, spending the rest of your life fixing it, and then you're fixing the fixing because all the guys who built it have left and no one really understands the design, and the design is very opaque anyway, and every fix you make creates another problem.
Yeah.
And that's how people fail.
Yeah, but some may argue that right now the development frameworks currently used are so well written and so foolproof that you cannot go that wrong, even with a less skilled process stack or with a less skilled engineer.
Well, I mean, first of all, I would agree with you. The tool set is so much better now, and it's there to help. the process of system development, software development. That's absolutely true. And I will go back and address your point directly, but slightly indirectly. What I would say is I've seen those much better tools being used to enable relatively small teams of very high quality engineers to build amazing products really quickly. And so the example I always use is WhatsApp. Okay, WhatsApp.
Yeah, yes, that's
by a small team using those software as a services, using cloud, AWS, I think, and so on and so on. And their ability to build something amazing really quickly was enabled by those tools. But I go back to this point. That was a team of incredibly high quality people, knowledge workers who had a vision for a product, who actually, and this is important, they understood what problem they were trying to solve for whom. They all understood it. So they were all coming from the same place. So whenever they had to make a decision, which is all the time when you're doing software development, the decision was informed by this knowledge of what they were trying to do, what they were trying to achieve. And those tools made it so much easier. So I'm a massive fan of those tools. And actually, I don't think I'm against commoditization generally, because I think there's a weird thing happened in infrastructure and service delivery, which is that we now have commoditized hardware services, service delivery, operations, infrastructure through cloud. And actually, the quality has gone up massively as a result of that commoditization. The bar has gone up massively. When I look at where we were in terms of the quality of service delivery and ops and data centers and all that stuff 15, 20 years ago, and where we are now because of Amazon, etc., it's like the difference between night and day. But it doesn't seem to apply on software development. The tools are just tools, but they have to be used by craftsmen. So if I Google the word painters right now, it knows this. Google knows where I live, knows where everyone lives,
of course, and much more.
Yes, it's like the Stasi. It will come up with two things and everything in between. So at one end of the spectrum, it will come up with people who can come and decorate my house and paint my ceiling and my walls, and it will come up with Picasso. Okay, and they both use brushes. And the brushes are the tools. and in systems development, software development, that absolutely seems to apply. And if someone says, well, that doesn't sound very logical, et cetera, all I can do is to defend this is the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I see firsthand all the time, unfortunately, the products of low-skilled, low-experienced, commoditized developers. And I see the products of highly skilled, highly experienced developers. And even if they're both using the same tools, the outputs are, the difference is enormous. And that's what I mean by it's still heterogeneous, not homogenized. And that's just a fact. Can the tools ever take us to a place where, anyone given the right training can do a good job of systems development? So far, the answer seems to be no. And I've been thinking about, well, why is it no? Well, I think it's got something to do with the fact that systems development is actually a creative job. It is a creative job. It's like music. You cannot commoditize music. People try, of course, and they try all the time. Yeah. But it doesn't work. And it seems to be the same with systems development. There is so much creativity in software development. And of course, it's hidden by the sitting at a desk looking at a screen. Everyone's sitting at a desk looking at a screen. And you can't see the creativity. And then the creativity itself is somewhat hidden from the business community in a way that music isn't hidden, in a way that fine art isn't hidden. Now, it manifests in the cost of support. It manifests in what it's like to be a user of the system. But, it's not there staring you in the face. But if you understand architecture and if you understand coding, I've seen some architecture designs. I've thought about telling you about one, but I've decided against it because if any of the people involved hear it, they'll know it's them and they'll feel embarrassed. So I won't say. But I saw a Microsoft tool. I almost said what it did, but I won't. Being used inside an application. once, and it should never be used inside applications. It's a tool designed to facilitate communication between systems, or even between entities, between organizations. Okay. And it was used inside an application. And it was a mind-bogglingly bad decision. And it had a high impact because it was in capital markets. And when we discovered this eventually, because again, it's not staring you in the face, and we did a support call to Microsoft, they burst out laughing. And then they apologized that they burst out laughing. But they just said, how could anyone even think to do that? And we said, we'll never know. And, and that's, you can give people all the tools in the world, but that creativity, that decision-making, it's like chess. Chess is fairly easy to learn. It's almost impossible to play at grandmaster level. It's same with music, same with art and systems development. I don't want to mythologize it too much, but I think it's been demythologized far too much. The commoditization thing is completely missing the point. They don't just write code. They're actually doing design every minute of the day. And you can only do design if you've got great skills, great intellect, or a certain type of intellect and experience. And you can't just be trained to write code and then be a great developer. I was thinking this morning about great developers. I don't know if any of the people listening to your podcast will know the names. I wrote some down. Let me have a look at my notes on my desk here. So I was thinking about, well, who are examples of people who actually almost single-handedly, and they would hate me saying that because it's not true. They had small teams with them, of course. But, and these guys are developers. They may have been perceived to be, like gurus or business leaders or something ultimately, but they were developers when they did this. Jim Kent, the Human Genome Project, practically carried the whole thing on his back. Jeff Dean, one of the two biggest contributors to big data with Big Table. Daniel Bernstein, he did, I think it was called QMail, which, how to deliver email. And that was one guy. These are developers, and of course Linus Torvalds for Linux. Again,
right.
Guys sitting down, writing code to do something, and the design coming from the bottom up. And that's how powerful great developers can be. And if you just say, we've got Michael in the corner, he's our architect, we're going to offshore the coding to the cheapest country we can find, and everything will be okay. Everything won't be okay. And will we get to the point, Mihai, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, where you can do that? Maybe. Personally, I have a lot of doubts, because it's never been done with music. Maybe it'll be done with music one day. Mm-hmm. At the moment, it doesn't apply. It absolutely doesn't apply. And these product failure rates and these project failure rates and these company failure rates directly correlate, not perfectly, obviously. There's lots of factors come into play. But there is a direct correlation between these failure rates and the use of so-called commoditized development.
Right, of which I think the apex, the most, far thought out version is the citizen developer. I think you're familiar with the term. It means that anyone off the street can just sit down and write code, because all they need to do is just express what they want any application to do.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because I try and get people to do blue sky thinking, and I say, what would be the ultimate realization of this process? And the ultimate realization would be, you just think about it and it happens. Now,
okay, right. That's even more far-stretched, indeed.
That's at one end of the spectrum. Well, we can't do that yet. So, what's the minimum we have to do to get there? And this also relates to product development failure rates and the lean product development method and agile software development methodologies, which is that thing of thinking about what it is you're trying to do, the citizen developer. That's the thing that people get wrong massively. Because the number of startups who say, we're going to build X, and then they stick to it and they build X. If you analyze the failure rates of those sorts of companies, they're massive. And the success rates are highest for the companies that use the lean product development method, which says, I think people need something that can do X. I'm now going to go and speak to people. I'll think of a way of saying it to them. And then you go and see a few people. They ask you some hard questions and you think, oh, right, okay. They seem generally interested, but not quite in the way I imagined. So you go away and you think about your description of what X might be, and you go back with version 2 of X to a slightly wider group of people, and you propose it again. And they might just be friends, business associates, colleagues. And then you come back and think, oh, this might have legs. And then you build a prototype. And actually, here's one thing, by the way. What's one way to separate commoditized weak developers from good developers? If somebody can't build a prototype, don't hire them. So,
okay.
So then you go back and you build a prototype. Now, it's a funny thing about requirements. So, I've completely taken against the waterfall method. The waterfall method is almost designed to fail because it stores up risk, misunderstanding, gaps, etc., contradictions for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and they only become manifest when somebody eventually sees the system. Of course, lean and agile methods, you build a prototype, you show it to people, and it's the psychology thing. People see the prototype, and immediately they come up with 10 things they never said before, because what you're showing them is stimulating thinking in their brain. And so your prototype generates enormous amounts of feedback. And again, you go away and you change your product. And then you show it to a wider group of people, you get some more feedback, you change it. And of course, it's called, pivot in the lean method. And you keep changing. And that method has an 80% success rate as compared to, say, an 80% failure rate. The guys who say, I'm going to build X and then go and build X, they have an 80% failure rate because, they're just basing everything on their own opinions of the world, not on reality.
Uh-huh.
And so, why do so many projects fail? And why would citizen developer fail? He or she would fail for that reason. And so, we can't lump it all onto the developers at all. There is something quite fundamental going on. Now, so why do I say all that in a conversation about commoditized systems development? I actually think it's really important that developers understand that as well. Because developers who just think my job is to sit and write code, they're missing the point. Their job is to facilitate success for their client or their employer. And if they don't understand what success is, and they don't have a view on the product and its utility for people and why it has a great deal of utility for people or might have, then again, they're going to make the wrong decision. So I think they really need to be plugged into that bit. Because that bit's going massively wrong as well, not just the use of commodity developers, but there is an overlap. There's an overlap as well.
Right. Now, you've worked with or been exposed to several companies led by obviously extremely brilliant people who started out small, some of them were already big. And let's say who a while ago turned to skilled developers for which they were ready to pay premium. However, once they got massive and actually had access to more resources, then switched on to much cheaper development models. Why would you think that happened?
Well, sometimes people don't realize what it is that made them a success. So as you know, I started with one company which was 35 people, and it became 13,000 people. Fantastic success. There is something about, and I do say this to people doing startups, and I said it to that particular team as well, which is, they were determined to keep it as a relatively small number, hundreds, not thousands, of very high quality people who could more or less do anything. And, because that would be a very pleasurable place to work. And I said it won't happen because this group of highly talented people, including, highly talented IT people, will build products and services that are so successful that you will grow much more than you're expecting. And then you'll become a victim of your own success. Because one of the examples they used was the biggest beast in their particular domain had thousands or tens of thousands of people and a very low margin, I say 7%, whereas the margin at this startup, was 50%, and there was talk of we'll always keep the margin at 50%. And
okay.
We'd rather be 400 people and 50% margin than 10,000 people and 7% margin. And I said it doesn't work like that either. I actually know the chairman, the son of the founder of that much larger company. And they said that as well, and they became, very successful. And then you become a victim of your own success. And then what happens in any company that grows and is successful is that you have to employ the sorts of people you said you'd never employ. Being slightly facetious here, the people who go to meetings and write emails for a living, and so on and so on. And lots of people who create business processes, bureaucratic processes, and there's a lot of budgeting and all those HR processes, etc. All those things that people instinctively go to startups to get away from, perhaps the corporate processes. And I also said to them, these things are there for a reason. It's inevitable. They're not just spurious. They're there for a reason. And then you get into cost-based accounting. Then you get into why we're spending so much money on IT, Mihai. So a very long-winded answer to your question. Eventually you get down to, can't we do this for less?
Uh-huh.
And then the poor old CTO, who was, for years free to go and hire people for 1,500 euros a day who were brilliant. And you and I know some brilliant people that you've supplied to me. Mm-hmm. As people who've won, world hacking championships and so on. And the value, and let me introduce the concept of value here. I think everything that you do should be measured in terms of its ultimate value. Some of the projects you and I worked on brought in many, many millions of dollars in revenue, many millions. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't matter that we were paying, somebody 1,500 euros a day when, another offshore provider could do it for half that or less. It didn't matter, because if we'd gone for the cheaper person, we'd never have got the highly successful product. We'd never have got the millions of dollars of revenue. And so, those CTOs who were my peers at that particular company that you and I both know, they had a free hand to hire the best people, and they did understand the quality difference. But then when it became 10,000 people and more, then they had to answer to not only a chief financial officer, but budgeting committees and everything else. And it was all focused on making sure they address the margin, because if the margin goes down, your share price goes down, because of course by then you're floated. And it's a whole different ballgame, Mihai. That is the harsh reality of how it happens. Now, what can we do to help the CTOs? Well, the CTOs and the CIOs, I feel, need to make a stronger case for quality, about the value of the output, about the difference between people who cost 1,500 euros a day and people who cost 200 euros a day. But I also think that the nearshore suppliers, particularly, should be making that case as well, and shouldn't just say, yes, I can give you people for 200 euros a day. I think you should at least launch into the Cliff Moyce long speech about why it's not a good idea. It's a cause, and how can you mitigate those problems? Give the CTO the words, and and of course these days, in very recent years, we now have some nice case studies of, as going back to the WhatsApp example, but it's not the only example. You look at other stuff that's been built with small teams, and I think things like Trello and so on, and just say, you can generate tens of millions of revenue from a small team, as long as you hire the right team and pay them 2 or 3 times what you think the market rate is. And this thing about market rate, it's horrible. It's not true. It's just not true.
You think there is no real market rate?
Well, no. I think what there is, and this is the thing that non-IT people are not doing. I can find almost no one who can do this well these days. And it's producing business cases. I think any company, whether it's a startup or a large corporation, going to build something new or re-engineer something, should produce a business case which really, analyzes and validate what the value to this organization of this new product or service is going to be. And when I say validates, I mean goes out and speaks to real customers, which for some reason people are terrified to do. And it's the number one thing they should do. It's where you get all your best ideas, but you should validate it. Because once you come back and you say, look, with the best will in the world, this project can be done by 20 people in 6 months. It doesn't matter what you pay them. When the revenue is going to be so high. And if the revenue isn't going to be so high, should you be doing it at all? And I really think that, and of course, I've been 7 or 8 years now, working with leading the financial services, capital markets aspects of a, relatively large or growing professional services company in capital markets. Mm-hmm. And, we found ourselves having to help our clients with that a lot. Giving them the tools to go to their peers and say, this is what you're going to get from doing this. But it can only be built by people of a certain quality. And one of the other things I hate is job titles. This junior developer, senior developer, architect. How much do you charge for an architect? How much do you charge for a business analyst? How much do you charge for a project manager? It's the kiss of death, right?
Okay. Can you delve a bit further into that? Because I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, because again, it's about commoditization. It's what you want is you want to fully understand what your proposed product or service is going to do for whom, and what problems it solves for them, how you could market it, and then what you could expect to earn from it. And then, with a high quality team, what you would take to build. And that high quality team should just be referred to as engineers. I think job titles just, they create this, they reinforce the commoditization model. They also slightly reinforce this division of labor. No, they massively reinforce the division of labor, the waterfall method. Right, waterfall, as we all know, is, some version of analysis, design, build, test, release, and you can call it, discovery and, requirements gathering, requirements definition, and all that sort of stuff. But that, and those job titles, if you think about it, they match a model of the world, which has been proven to be the highest risk way of building any system, because it stores up mysteriously. Everyone's building against a requirements document, and the requirements document's never seen by a client anywhere, and so on and so on and so on. So I just think you need a group of people who together can build the product or service, and just call them engineers. And I've seen slightly radical articles saying you don't need business analysts, you don't need project managers, you don't need this, you don't need that. You just need engineers who are so good that they can envisage the product, speak to their customers, make decisions, and build it. And in the process of building it, they're designing it. Sort of the
stem cell engineer.
Yes, correct. And this article is both right and wrong, because what I would say is it's great to have people with business analysis skills. It's great to have people with project management skills. It's great to have people, there's a list of skills that, and this is the Agile method. I implemented Agile in another market data company, not the one we've been referring to so far, but another market data company. And by implementing Agile, I didn't mean developers mumbling at their shoes every morning before they go to work. I meant multifunctional teams who were focused on building working software in relatively short time periods, sprints, which they then showed to the client and got their feedback and so on and so on. And, I didn't want people referred to as developers and testers, because then they sat there, and this is what happened initially, and somebody would say, well, I'm not doing that. I'm a developer. I'm not doing testing. If you make me do testing, I'm going to leave. And we would just say, well, goodbye, because we actually want people who, would enjoy doing anything. It's just like, how are we going to get this product out the door and make our customers a success, our clients a success, and make ourselves a success, and so that's why I don't like job titles, and that's why I don't like, daily rates and all that sort of stuff. I want somebody to say, this is going to generate millions for us, but also for our customers, it's going to generate millions for them. And let's think about the skills we need, the sorts of people we need, and how long we need them for, let's estimate the cost of doing this project, at least up to minimum viable product level, and go from there.
Yeah, I think it's also a matter of people being very apt at estimating costs, but not so good at estimating revenues or lack thereof.
Absolutely. I've been shocked recently. I just can't find anyone who can do it. And, for the people who know me and who are thinking, well, I can do it, I apologize to them. But part of that disappointment is because when I started off in manufacturing and engineering, it felt like it was a more commonly understood way of working. It was almost the culture that whatever you were proposing to build would have to repay itself 3 times within 3 years. And, it was kind of that level of, it seemed a more common way of doing work, and now it's been lost, but it's fundamentally important because it should drive everything. And now we've become very focused on cost. And that's a commoditization trick, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We should focus on value because, again, it's hard for me to go into and explain on a call, but maybe I could write an article for you or something on this one day. But what's the difference between the value generated by a really good developer and a commoditized standard developer? Probably a wonderful human being, but really with very little training and experience and exposure and so on. What's the difference? Is it 10 times more value generated by that?
Yeah, well, the 10x.
It's 100 times, and this is it's 100 times high. And I could write an article on why is it 100 times, and how can you prove it? And then there's what again, this thing I wrote that article, The Dirty Secret of Financial Technology.
Yes.
The way the whole financial services industry has accepted that any system that is built has to be supported, but support is just really fixing it for years, and it costs a fortune. And yet, developers who were trained and educated in the former Soviet Union are typically, certainly in your city, Mihai, they're typically trained, at least for the first 2 years, on embedded systems development, where bugs are just like they're not an option. Bugs are not an option because it's going into the field, whether it's a washing machine or a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, you can't go in the field and fix the washing machine, which is faulty.
Exactly. There's no concept of this terrible thing of bugs going into production and then, people spending years fixing it. I was hoping that nearshore outsourcing would bring that culture to the West, to the UK, to Western Europe, to the US. I worry that actually we're polluting the minds of the Eastern European engineers with our sloppy ways of working, and that's another podcast call, isn't it?
Hopefully. I'd love to.
What's the increased cost from using weak developers compared to super strong developers? And again, it costs 10 times more to support. It costs 100 times more to support. And, the business people, inverted commas, and I include myself in that cadre, they don't understand that. They don't. Fundamentally, they don't. And I think there's a big education process needed. And I'm trying to do it myself.
Okay.
You know what I'm like, writing articles and banging on about it to everyone. But, I can't do it. I can only scratch the surface. So
what do you think any company like Cegeka, or let's say another company that really wants to preserve its reputation in the market as a provider of good solutions, which are not legacy code from the moment they're written, and I'm quoting you on this. Yep. I like that expression. What do you think they could or should do in order to let's say, push the message forward, or what else could they do to really prove their worth in front of prospects and customers?
Well, I think that they can do what I've been doing for the last few years, because obviously I've been a buyer of professional services for years, and then for the last 7 or 8 years I've been a provider of them, which is to say these things and to educate and to explain. And I always say to people, you might say, well, you would say that, Cliff, it's to your advantage to say that because you can then charge us more. But I think I'd like to think there's an aspect where people realize that I'm really genuine about it because I can talk about it from both sides. And I can give examples. I don't want to give examples on a podcast, but in private, I can give examples of organizations that have made what I feel is the wrong decision, and then the impact it's had, even ones where me and my guys have had to go in and rescue the project or even the company, because I did work in company rescue for a few years. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I'm not saying walk away from it and saying, well, we're not doing that. Well, what I say, one of the things I say is, we're not a body shop. We don't just provide people. It's not what we do. We're a massively value add. We partner with our clients long term, not single projects. Though, if you want to do a single project and we like the idea of it, we'll do a single project. But, generally our clients, who are some of the biggest names in the industry, are clients for years, and we do multiple projects. But more importantly than that, we help them decide what projects they should do and why. And how. And there's a massive value add in all of those things, including the how. And then we do it because of the massive failure rate in the industry. What we don't want is for you to fail, not because it's monetary to us. It's because of, it's not why we come to work, right? We come to work to do a great job for you and to share in your success and to have that amazing feeling. There's one exchange where, we built a blockchain-enabled settlement process, the first one in the industry. And it stripped out 99% of the cost of doing settlements, private market settlements, and it stripped out an enormous amount of the time, probably close to 99% again.
Impressive.
Right, and I can't remember how much money we made from that project, and I don't care because we're so proud of doing it. And it wasn't our idea; it was their idea, but we're so proud of having been involved in that, and that's why we actually come to work. And we would hate to just work on a project that where we think the client's doing the wrong thing. There's an element of, well, if we go in, we can coach and help and advise and so on. But so that's what I think all nearshore or Western onshore IT professional services companies can do is, they've got so much knowledge and experience. Share it. Apologize maybe for the fact that you're going on about it again, and you might think it's not of interest to them, but do explain how you operate to avoid errors, and how it will cost more in the short term and save them perhaps everything in the long term. Mm-hmm. And you can use case studies. There are case studies, and you can use your own case studies.
Yeah. Those we have indeed.
Exactly, we all have them.
Right. Well, this has been extremely useful and pleasant, Cliff. So I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure. And thanks for inviting me on.
This won't be the last time.
Okay. That's a deal.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Cliff, again, and all the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.